In this video, I'll tell you what Claude Fable 5 was actually like, the big three things it genuinely advanced in, and why just days after launching, the most powerful AI model Anthropic had ever released to the public suddenly vanished. Because that's the wild part. This wasn't a quiet deprecation. The US government stepped in and Fable 5 went dark for everyone. So let's talk about what we had and what made it special and what happened. Quick intro if you're new here, my name is Jaime and I'm a master's student at SUTD, the world's first AI and design university. So I spend most of my time deep in emerging tech, testing tools the moment they ship and figure out what actually holds up versus what's just hype. At the time of the recording, Fable 5 was actually just taken away just as I was recording this video, and I didn't have much time in the week to try out Fable 5 unfortunately. But nevertheless, we can review what Fable 5 was about in a short window that people had their hands on. Before I hit the three advances, let me set the scene quickly. Anthropic launched Fable 5 as a Mythos class model that they made safe for general use, and its capabilities exceeded those of any models they'd ever made generally available. It was a state-of-the-art on nearly all tested benchmarks, with exceptional performance in software engineering, knowledge work, vision, and scientific research, and the longer and more complex the task, the larger it led grew. So this wasn't a small step. This was the frontier, handed to the public. With that in mind, here are the three things they actually advanced it. Point number one, memory. The first thing that stood out was just how much Fable 5 could juggle all at once without falling apart. It shipped with a 1,000,000 token context window and 128,000 maximum output, with a knowledge cutoff of January 2026. 1,000,000 tokens is roughly 750,000 words, which is several full-length novels of material you can drop in all at once. But big numbers on a spec sheet are cheap. Plenty of models have bragged about huge context windows and then suddenly quietly crumble the moment you actually fill them. You could hand them with a towering stack of documents, but by the time they reached the bottom of the pile, they'd already forgotten what was written at the top. Fable 5 stayed focused across millions of tokens, and it did nothing genuinely new. It wrote notes to a file-based memory tool as it worked, so it wasn't just cramming everything into its head and hoping nothing slipped out. It kept its running record the way a good researcher keeps a notebook open on a desk instead of trying to memorize the whole entire library. In practice, that meant you could hand it an entire codebase and ask it to refactor across multiple files. You could feed it a stack of research papers and ask it to synthesize the threads tying them together. You could give it a long document-heavy workflow that used to force you to chop everything into tiny pieces and stitch the answers back together by hand. It was built for long-running, multi-stage asynchronous work, the kind of task that you previously had to babysit. That was the advanced headline, and it's the one that I missed most once the model disappeared. Point number two, vision. Second area where Fable 5 pushed things forward was vision, and this is where it quietly became the new state of the art. Vision in AI wasn't new, of course. We'd had models that could glance at an image and describe it for a while, but there's a canyon between a model that can tell you, oh, that's a chart, and oh, that's a model that can actually read a chart. Fable 5 lived firmly on the second side of that canyon. It could read precise numbers straight off scientific figures and graphs, which matters a lot if you've ever watched an AI confidently invent the numbers it couldn't quite make out. It could pull information out of diagrams and tables buried inside files and PDFs, not just clean standalone images, which is how documents actually look in finance, legal, or analytics, architecture, or something like research. But the feature that genuinely made me sit up was this. Fable 5 could rebuild a web app's source code from screenshots alone. You'd show it a picture of an interface and it would just reconstruct the front end that would produce it. Fable 5's vision was the kitchen. It took the raw ingredients of what it saw and actually cooked them into something structured and usable. So designers were reconstructing UIs from screenshots, analysts were pulling embedded charts into clean tables, and students, like me, were feeding it dense textbook diagrams and getting real explanations back. It opened up a visual and document-heavy work across a ton of fields, and honestly, it was the feature with the most immediate wow factor. Point 3, safety. The third advanced is the most people skip about, and is also ironically tied to why the model isn't here anymore. Here's the background. Fable 5 was a top-tier Mythos class capability, but made safe for everyone through a set of safety classifiers, separate systems watching for requests in sensitive areas like cybersecurity, biology, and chemistry. And here's the clever part. With most models hitting a guardrail, it gives you a flat refusal. Fable 5 instead routed those sensitive queries into Anthropic's next most capable model, Claude Opus 4.8. So you got a redirect rather than a dead end. Anthropic's early data showed that more than 95% of Fable sessions never triggered a fallback at all. So for everyday writing, coding, and analysis, you never even notice it. It only gets kicked in at the edges. Now pair that with an adaptive thinking where the model scaled how hard it reasoned to match the task. And you had something both powerful and aware of its own limits. But this is exactly where the story takes a turn. Those very capabilities, especially in cybersecurity, are what drew government attention, and just days after launch, everything stopped. So what actually happened? Now, maybe yesterday for you, but today on June 12, the US government, citing national security authorities, issued an export control directive to suspend all access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5 by any foreign national, whether inside or outside the United States. The net effect was that Anthropic had to abruptly disable Fable 5 and Mythos 5 for all customers to ensure compliance. While access to every other model stayed unaffected, they received the directive at 5:21 p.m. Eastern that day, and the letter didn't provide specific details of the national security concern. This appears to be the first time a leading AI company has taken a publicly developed model offline because of intervention from the federal government. And Anthropic did not stay quiet about it. They said they're complying with a legal directive, but disagree that the finding of a narrow potential jailbreak should be cause of recalling a commercial model deployed to hundreds of millions of people. They warned that if this standard were applied across the industry, it would essentially halt all new model developments for every frontier model provider. They called it a misunderstanding and said they're working to restore access as soon as possible. So where does that leave you now? As of today, Fable 5 is unavailable to everyone, and it was pulled abruptly and indefinitely rather than retired on a normal deprecation schedule. Every other Claude model, including Opus 4.8, remains fully available, so if you're leaning on Fable 5, the practical move is to fall back into Opus 4.8, which is no slouch itself, and not bet your entire workflow on any single model that can vanish overnight. So that was Claude Fable 5, the enormous context with real memory, the vision that didn't just see but read and rebuilt, and the smart and safe thing routing that in a strange way is wrapped up and why it's gone for now. It was a genuine glimpse of the frontier and hopefully one we get back soon. If access comes back, I'll make a follow-up on the moment it does, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.